You know, I don't really like making these videos, honestly. I wish I could just focus on, game good, here's some strategies, here's some builds, here's some whatever. But sometimes I feel like I have to make these kinds of videos, and it's been a while since I felt so compelled to make these kinds of videos. But while Path of Exile is a game that has so many good changes, it has seemingly equal as many really, really bad changes. Like, we get all of these good updates, but then these situations happen where they make a change and everyone is just like, what? Why would you do that? And the Archnemesis mods are one of those changes for me. And the main point of this video and the main reason that I wanted you to click on this video is because I want to know. I want you to tell me down in the comments. Do you think that the changes to putting Archnemesis mods in the game made the game more fun? I don't care about whether it's too difficult to deal with or whether it's too easy or whether it's too hard, whatever. Did it make the game more fun? Are you enjoying yourself more because of these Archnemesis mods? Does it feel like there's some extra cool challenge, or does it just feel like it's a pain every single time that you run into them? I'm curious to see what you think, because I know what I think, and you'll probably know what I think by the end of this video, but are you having more fun? So make sure do that before you listen to the rest of this video, because I'm probably going to influence your opinion a little bit. So at this point, we've gotten a patch that GGG is removing some of the immunities to Archnemesis, and as I was sitting down this morning and I woke up and I looked at the patch notes and I'm like, okay, so how many patches have we done so far to try desperately to balance these Archnemesis mods? Why are they still in the game? Why did we not just realize immediately, hey, we didn't actually test these as much as we promised that we did. These mods are obviously completely half-baked. We didn't do any real meaningful testing. Like, maybe they tested to make sure there were no bugs or anything like that. But for the actual balance of them, either someone is completely disconnected from actually playing the game, or like they just didn't actually test them as much as they said. And I know that, they've claimed that the testers are not at fault here, but I'm talking about like the people at the top, the people who are designing the game and saying that this is okay. Why are we forcing these mechanics into the most basic part of the game? Why are they still in the game? At this point, I'm surprised that GGG didn't just be like, oh, well, these modifiers, they're obviously not that great. Let's remove them and we'll put them back in at a later time. Why are we not doing that instead of whatever it is that we're doing now, where we're like weeks into the development cycle and they're still putting patches out trying to fix this stuff that I don't even really think is really fun, and I'll talk about multiple reasons for that. So why are we at the point where we're just forcing these modifiers into the game and disrupting the main balance of the entire game as a whole? So talking about why I don't think these modifiers are fun, the main issue that I run into is that I never really get into situations very much where I'm like, man, that modifier was really cool. That was really difficult and fun and cool and interesting to deal with. Most of the time, the modifiers are just like, wow, this is really annoying, or I literally don't care. So in cases like that, is it actually that interesting to have some modifier that does some weird eclectic thing that I have no idea really a lot of the time what it does? And I think back to the Bay Class episode where they were talking about like a glossary, and I'm like, man, it actually would have been really nice to have a glossary for all of these mods, because I don't know what most of them do, to be honest with you. I know like various little things that some of them do that screw over my build, but I really don't know what all of them do. And I think that this is the root of the problem. When Chris was talking about these modifiers, he said something along the lines of, he wanted it so that people could see at a glance and know what these modifiers are and be very specific, cool, interactive things. And I've realized that they've actually done the opposite. Previously, when you looked at a mob and you saw like fast attacks or like resist cold damage or something like that, you knew what it did. And when they were pitching the modifiers, I'm like, oh yeah, so like, Ice Prison one will put an Ice Prison around you, and Flame Weaver one will like shoot flames at you or something like that, or Incinerator will leave incineration things on the ground. I didn't expect the mods to literally have like 15 effects for each and every single one of them. So now I look at a mob that's got like 3 or 4 of these Archnemesis modifiers, and I have to know 40 different things that it does, instead of previously just looking at a rare mob and being like, oh, well, it's got like faster attacks and, extra cold damage. Okay, cool. I never really looked at most of those anyways, but before I could actually look at them. So I feel like it's done the opposite of what it was intended to do. Now, conceptually, I think that it's an okay thing, right? I think that's like, yeah, they're putting some more interesting stuff on modifiers, and making it so that, you know, we have cooler, more interesting situations that happen. But as I've sat and thought about it more, two things have come to mind. One, I have realized that I don't really care what the enemies are anymore. I only really care what their modifiers are. And like when you see certain enemies, there are particular enemies in the game that have very particular effects, right? There's some enemies that do corpse explosions. There's some enemies that can like charge you from off screen. There's some enemies that can, you know, do very particular things. And seeing those enemies, you're like, oh, I need to be ready and deal with this or that or whatever that they're doing. Now I just look at the modifiers and I'm like, oh, this thing's got like Flame Weaver, Incinerator, blah, 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 blah. That means I can't do damage to it. I guess I'm going to run away. Or, you know, it's just like, I don't really see enemies for what they are anymore. I see them for what their modifiers are now. And the second thing that I've realized is that you can't escape from these. They're everywhere. The only place in Path of Exile right now where you basically don't run into these modifiers at all is sitting in your hideout and doing boss farming. It's very strange to me that they've decided to make such a giant, meaningful, crazy change to the base core balance of the game without actually making sure that it feels okay. Because it's very obvious at this point that they did not check it. At least not enough. Maybe the testers were like, yeah, this doesn't feel good, this is really difficult or this, but they obviously did not listen to these testers. It's blatantly obvious. Because frankly, immunities to anything do not need to be in the game, especially when you cannot choose whether or not they are in the game. You can't avoid a lot of these immunities. In this recent patch, they're removing some of them, but they're not removing all of them. They're not removing sun immunity or wither immunity or a couple other ones, right? There's some that they've just conveniently forgotten at this point. But why are we taking so many steps back and making so many mistakes that we used to? And you might be saying to me, but Big, that's this video game, you can't complain. It's like, no, I can complain, okay? I've been playing this game, I've been making content for this game for a long time. I love this game, and it's a game that I support over the course of time. I don't look at this as like, oh, well, you know, if you don't like it, stop complaining and just leave. No, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way at all. I've put in a bunch of money into this game. I put in a bunch of time and I've put in a bunch of effort in this game, making content for it, streaming it, and all kinds of other stuff. And when I see these kinds of changes, it's frustrating because it's like, I feel like slowly as we go on further and further, I keep losing little bits of the game that I feel like I enjoy. And it's just, it's sad because these kinds of changes just frustrate me at the end of the day. I know the game needs to change and maybe it's just not going to be the game for me at some point, but I still don't like seeing them because when I literally can't escape this change whatsoever, when it's just like a modifier, like why couldn't this have been a modifier on maps? Like why couldn't this have been like extra rare monsters and they have, you know, Archnemesis mods? Why couldn't we have done that? Then you can choose whether or not that those modifiers are in the game. Why does it just have to be everywhere? Typically, Path of Exile is a game about choice. It's a game about agency. It's a game about, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. I want to play this build and I want to farm this thing. Instead, they've put these modifiers that were build disabling, and they're still build disabling to this point. Like build disabling, frustrating, difficult, and they've just put them, they've permeated through the entirety of the game. There's no content that you can do that doesn't have them in them besides boss farming and sitting in your hideout. That's it. So why are we making such drastic changes without actually testing? Another point of contention that I have here is the campaign. When I first played through the campaign at the very beginning of the league, I was like astonished, to be frank. I was like, what have they done? I'm an experienced player. I typically don't have problems with the campaign at all. I can get through the campaign on a league start scenario 5 or 6 hours, like maximum, especially even faster if I'm playing a build that I'm super comfortable with. And I still did that, but there were times in the early bits of the campaign where I'm like getting one shot by random blue crabs at like level 3, like one blue crab hitting me one time, one shot me from full health. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that I was being one shot so frequently by random blue mobs. And the fact that I couldn't do damage to any of them, and the fact that like nothing was working the way that I thought that it should be working. And it made me realize that GGG is pretty much completely written off the campaign at this point, is what it feels like to me. It seems like when they make these changes, they are completely focused on how they affect the endgame and maps and all that kinds of stuff. And even Archnemesis wasn't tested for that, I guarantee it at this point. But so when Chris says things along the lines of like, well, you know, the PoE 2 campaign is going to be so different and we really like it and we think it's going to be a vast majority of upgrades to the basic campaign here, I don't know how much I believe that anymore, because they've either completely written off the first campaign and don't care about it, or they actually don't know how to balance the campaign in any meaningful way, because it's one or the other, and it really makes me sad. It makes me think that maybe the PoE 2 campaign's not actually going to be as good as they're claiming it's going to be. So why don't you just give us alternative leveling options right now, GGG? I mean, who cares? Force people to make, go through the campaign once per league, and then let them do whatever they want afterwards. Beyond that, beyond the changes to Archnemesis mods, beyond my feelings on the campaign, I know this video is basically just me complaining the entire time, but I had to get this out of my mind at some point because it was overwhelming me. I think that the rest of this patch is fine. I think that the Uber Boss changes are okay. I messed around with a couple of them on standard and they were whatever, and I mean, they're difficult, they're cool, it is what it is. I don't think the drops are worthwhile at all. I think it's actually kind of a joke. So they definitely need to kind of like balance the risk reward of doing the Uber Bosses, because it's like there's almost no point in doing them right now. Like, why would you kill an Uber Boss except for fun? And then Sentinel is pretty cool, but there's not a ton of depth to it. It's basically just like, well, do the normal content and Sentinel it, and it makes it more difficult and more rewarding. That's good. We need something like that in PoE. I think that it is a very good league, one of the better league mechanics that they've released, actually. It's just unfortunate that it had come with a patch that so massively disrupted things and left such a sour taste in so many people's mouths. So that's gonna be it. I don't really like making these videos. As I said, I'd rather just make happy videos about farming and currency making and cool builds and all kinds of other stuff, but I just have to get this out of my brain because it was kind of overwhelming me. And I know this video was a lot of complaining, but if you enjoy this content, if you like me complaining, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest content, and stay safe out there in Ray Class from all the Archnemesis mods, and I will see you guys in the next video.